Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Oregon Ducks Stock Report. Taking a look back at the month of September, talking about some players that are risers, talking about some players that have played some really good football in the month of September, also talking about some players I wouldn't necessarily label them fallers, but players that we want to see play better football heading into the month of October. Kind of answering the question like, hey, if this team's going to win a national championship, what players need to kind of pick it up going into the month of October? Fired up to get into this one now. Before we do, and as always, to the Oregon Duck fans, look, there's probably 20 to 25 names that we could talk about. I have three risers, two fallers. And again, the fallers category is much more of just players I want to see play a little bit better. Would love to hear some shout outs from you guys in terms of players that have impressed you, players that you want to see play better football. Of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. All the support the Duck fans have shown the boys been amazing. Appreciate you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with a comment, actually, a few comments that you guys left when we recapped the Oregon UCLA game from this weekend. And that is, look, nobody's talking about Jabbar Muhammad. That's a good thing. Like, you want your number one cornerback just quietly doing his thing out there on the boundary. That's exactly what Jabbar Muhammad has done. Taking a look at the stats from the month of September, faced 22 targets, only has given up 10 catches. That's a 45% completion percentage when targeted, leads the team in pass breakups. The stat that I probably love the most, 0% missed tackles. This kid hasn't missed a tackle to start the 2024 season. Look, when you're a defensive back, you are at times asked to make some plays in space. It's hard to bring ball carriers to the ground out there on an island, and Jabbar Muhammad's done it in the few times that he's been asked to do it because ain't nobody really completing any passes on him. You saw in the UCLA game, it was essentially a no-fly zone. Like, he only faced two targets, zero catches. I don't blame UCLA for not really going at Jabbar Muhammad. And, kind of a similar vein, I would also give a shout out to nickel Brandon Johnson. That was kind of a storyline for Oregon heading into 2024, where Tashim Johnson going to move back to the safety position. Tashim Johnson was so good as a nickel last year for Oregon. We kind of had our questions about what that position would look like. Transfer Brandon Johnson coming over from Duke, been really, really impressive as well. Tackles in the run game. Brandon Johnson's doing everything that Tashim Johnson did last year. Like, yeah, we're really good in coverage, giving up less than a 50% completion percentage, but we're also being really physical in the box and run support. That's kind of what you need from the nickelbacks, and Brandon Johnson certainly has done that. Let's go to the defensive line, where I'm going to give another 2-for-1 shout out. Jordan Burch, Derek Carmen. Again, the Oregon Duck fans probably sick and tired of me saying this, but we were looking for difference makers, game wreckers on this Oregon defensive line. I think we're getting that from Derek Carmen and Jordan Burch. Take a look at Jordan Burch's numbers: 12 quarterback hurries, a 16% pass rush win rate, hammer in the run game, 4 pass breakups on the year, getting his big paws up at the line of scrimmage. I think you can tell you're seeing the flashes of what we kind of expected from Jordan Burch as a 5-star coming out of high school. You saw the flashes in 2023. I think you're seeing more of the flashes in 2024. And if you're an Oregon fan, you want him to build on a good September for this Oregon Ducks program. And secondly, Derek Carmen. Derek Carmen, in my opinion, look, I feel like we've spent a lot of time being critical of this Oregon Ducks team, I guess you'd say, just because they haven't necessarily played to the standard that many of us expected them to play to start 2024. Derek Harmon's been an absolute freak show on the middle of this defensive line. Taking a look at his numbers: 14 quarterback hurries, a 20% pass rush win rate. He's second in the team in tackles. I mean, name me another interior defensive lineman that's second on the team in tackles. Derek Carmen, not only a real big body, but he's been kind of a game wrecker on the inside, finding the ball carrier very often, really athletic, like incredible feat for this kid's size. I mean, Jordan Burch, Derek Carmen, a couple other guys that probably deserve shout outs to the one of the kind of positive takeaways that we don't always talk about is I think this defensive line has been, I think it's much better than it was in 2023. That was one of the biggest question marks for this Oregon team, is how good can they be on the defensive line? You look at, all the defenses that are national championship caliber. I think it starts along the line of scrimmage. I think Dan Lanning knows that and has spent a lot of time, resources, whether it's on the high school recruiting trail or in the transfer portal, to make sure this Oregon defensive line is good enough. I think it certainly has played good enough to start 2024. Last riser I want to talk about, and the guy that we didn't really talk about coming into the season, but I think has emerged as an absolute dude is Nishad Strother, and he's had to. Oregon to start the season against Idaho and Boise State, sloppy on the offensive line. Obviously, they dealt with some injuries, moved Poncho to guard. We're playing around with Charlie Pickard at center. The first 3 games for Oregon, they were largely trying to find the best recipe on the offensive line in terms of what 5 guys give us the best combination up front. I think they thought it'd be Charlie at center and Poncho at guard. Then they kick Poncho back to center, which I think is clearly where he's most comfortable at. And then you move Nishad Strother into that guard position. Nishad, you take a look at his numbers: 98 pass blocks, pass blocking reps on the season. He's only given up 1 pressure, 0 sacks. I think he's very good in the run game. Kind of a compact dude, right? 6'2", 320, plays low pads, can really move bodies off the line of scrimmage. I think he's been the answer for this Oregon offensive line, trying to find how the pieces fit together. And to be quite frank, I know Matthew Bedford's been dealing with the injury. I'm kind of interested to see if they just keep Nishad there at that guard spot, because I think this Oregon offensive line has looked significantly better with him in the lineup. He kind of came in late in the Boise State game, then kind of played in the Oregon State game, looked really good the last 2 weeks. I think we found him. I found I guess what I'd say is missing piece for this Oregon offensive line. Going to, again, I don't, we got to figure out a different word for fallers, guys that we want to see more from. And let's start with wide receiver Evan Stewart. I don't even know if it's necessarily on him as much as I just think he needs to get more opportunities. We kind of talked about it on Sunday morning. The one game that Evan Stewart had more than 5 targets, he went for over 100 yards against Boise State. The Oregon fans who've been listening for the last couple of months and really at almost a year at this point know that I think Evan Stewart's one of the best wide receivers in the country. And I think Oregon needs to do a better job treating him like that. And it's an interesting conversation. I would love to hear the Oregon Duck fans' opinion on this. I think there's a fine line between featuring a guy like Tez Johnson and being over reliant on a guy like Tez Johnson. I think Oregon's teetering on that line right now. They got a lot of other weapons, right? Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, Terrence Ferguson, Kenyon Sadiq, obviously a run game that is starting to emerge. When you watch the film of Dylan Gabriel, it's pretty clear that Tez Johnson's his guy. And I love that. Like, having that elite quarterback, wide receiver battery is very important. And I'm certainly not getting up here and arguing that Tez Johnson should be not as much involved. He should be a center part in this offense, but I wonder if at times the reliance on Tez Johnson is too extreme. And what if a defense is able to take away Tez Johnson? Does Dylan Gabriel have the comfortability? I don't know if that's a word, to go with other pass catchers on the outside. That's the question I have. Now, taking away Tez Johnson is easier said than done, and Coach Stein does a phenomenal job motioning Tez Johnson and kind of giving him his opportunities. But again, what I think can make this offense so special is how multidimensional it is, how many different ways it can stress and hurt a defense. Right now, I do feel like Dylan Gabriel's first read every time is Tez Johnson. He's clearly extremely comfortable going to Tez Johnson. My question is he too comfortable with Tez Johnson and not comfortable enough with some of these other pass catchers? I don't think that's true, because Trayshawn Holden, Evan Stewart, Terrence Ferguson, they're all getting their work. But I guess it's just a conversation for Oregon fans to monitor going forward. Last one I want to talk about, and a kind of a surprise name, but kind of going back and buzzing through the last couple of games, I'll say Marcus Harper. Now, I'll caveat this with I ain't that concerned about Marcus Harper. We've seen this kid play a ton of football for Oregon over the last couple of years. I just don't think he's been as good and as steady as he was in 2023. You take a look at some of the pass pro numbers. He's given up 5 pressures already through the first couple of games of the season. I think the crazy part is he only had 5 pressures given up all of last year. And Marcus Harper was extremely reliable for Oregon in 2023 and really throughout his Oregon Ducks career. Has struggled at times in pass pro. And I think that could be a function of the lack of stability on the inside of the offensive line, like having Poncho with him at center and then having Charlie Pickard with him at center, moving from left to right guard, kind of flip flopping. That could be an explanation. And it also could be an explanation that, look, it's the game of football. You're not going to play good every single game you play. I want to see him be a little bit more physically imposing in the run game, a little bit more reliable in pass protection. Am I very confident that he's going to find his form that we saw in 2023? Yeah, absolutely, because we've seen it the last couple of years. But I would like to see a little bit better play from him. And, I might even throw a Johnny Cornelius into that category too. I feel like a Johnny Cornelius, there are some reps where like that might be the best tackle in the country. And then there are some reps where it's like, oh, we got to be a little bit more consistent there. That's kind of part of going from being a good tackle to an elite tackle. Is every single rep I'm physically imposing my will and dominating, whether it's in the run game, whether it's in pass pro. I think on average, like a Johnny's been really good, but I want to see maybe a little bit more consistency, especially as you're going to start seeing some better edge rushers over the next couple of weeks, right? Ohio State, Michigan have some of the best in the business. You want to see them play their best football against some of the best competition in the country. Bryce Betcher, I think certainly could be another riser. Not a ton of fallers. As critical as we've been about this Oregon team start the season, it's played pretty well. I think there's only been really one problem that has kind of been on the offensive line to start the season. But on average, like this team's playing pretty dang good. It's just the expectations are extremely high. Those are what I have for the risers, fallers. We'll continue to update this list as we go on in 2024 year. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all